Thank you, everybody who has come online. As I mentioned before, for the early birds, we have an awful lot of people who are attending tonight. So I'm Warren Porter, as many of you know. From Iron Gate, we're very, very excited about this inaugural auction that we have coming up on Tuesday. We have a lot of interest in it. We've had some tremendous press from across the country, and we're really, really excited about it, the next step in our evolution. One of the things that we wanted to do to help everybody in this is bring on a friend of ours, Stephen Ranger of Ranger Wine. Now, I met Stephen probably 15 years ago or more when I was just a young pup in the business, and I really didn't know a heck of a lot. And Stephen was always tremendous with his time and very gracious, and we've been good friends since. Stephen was a live auctioneer, is a live auctioneer, is known by all the charities in Toronto, and he's going to walk us through today a number of different things that are really going to help everybody out for the auction site. Now, following that, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes showing you some highlights of the site that we have built and made some great improvements to since the Toronto Symphony auction. And so without further ado, I am going to spotlight it over to Stephen and have him take it from here. So welcome, Stephen. Thank you again.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Nice to be here. Nice to be asked to be part of this. And I guess I will just kind of preface my comments by saying that I kind of go way back in the fine art, sort of the fine wine auction world, in that it was back in 1999 that I started petitioning the LCBO to conduct auctions of fine wine in Ontario. And I was working at an auction house at the time, and very much engaged in the wine world, and wondered why there were no wine auctions here in Ontario other than the annual Toronto Symphony Orchestra fundraising auction. And the answer is because nobody had really tried. So I knocked on the LCBO's door for about 3 years, found a very receptive voice ultimately in a man named Barry O'Brien. And he and I kind of, between the two of us, put together the very first commercial auction of fine wine in Ontario that started in 2002. And when I look back at that first auction, it was held at the Design Exchange, and we had no idea who would come, who would participate, what it would look like. We had a catalog of about 500-600 lots, and our estimated value was, under $1 million. Well, the sale was sold out, and ended up with an estimate of $1 million selling $2 million. So that told us that, my gosh, there's a huge appetite for fine wine auctions in Ontario. And that continued successfully until Ritchie's kind of ultimately went away. And then it was taken over by Waddington's, who conducted it very successfully. The LCBO sort of shut it down again. Then when I joined Waddington's, they started it up again, and it runs successfully to this day. But one of the things it tells us is that there's a great market for fine wine at auction here in Ontario. And Warren, if you could just start the first slide, please. Thank you. So I've prepared a few slides to sort of just kind of give you some general ideas about, what wine looks like, fine wine at auction looks like, some buying strategies. We're going to cover quite a lot of territory tonight. But first things first, I think if we're going to be talking about wine, then we need to be drinking wine. And I hope you all have a glass of something great. I've got a Deep Roots Merlot from Naramata, BC, a beautiful Naramata bench in my glass tonight. And I hope you have something good as well. We will also be taking questions. You can ask your questions in the Q&A section down there on the lower right of your screen, and we will endeavor to answer questions that you have. I'm going to talk about kind of the history of wine auctions and the kind of mechanics of bidding on wine auctions, some buying strategies and things like that. And then Warren will walk you through the Iron Gate platform that is specific to the auction that, of course, Iron Gate is running nationally based in Calgary. There will also be polls at the end to ask you how you are feeling about the, asking you what you know, what's your takeaway from tonight's webinar, so that we can, ultimately, know how to communicate with you better, or Irongate will know how to communicate with you better, rather. I'm a guest here tonight and just very happy to be so. So let's go to the next slide. It's what wine auctions used to look like. And wine auctions, commercial wine auctions, their modern roots, as opposed to their very, very early roots, actually date back to 1859 in the Hospice de Beaune in Burgundy. And the Marquise and Marquesa of Burgundy held an auction in 1859 for the first time in order to support the Hospice de Beaune, which looked after the poor and the sick of Burgundy. And it had been sort of established in 1444, and they had donated their wines in order to kind of support this fabulous, charity for the poor of the region, but converted it to a wine auction in 1859. It still exists to this day. In fact, it's organized by Christie's, and the Hospice de Beaune is a still very influential auction. Now, fast forward into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the very, very robust English wine trade. As you know, the trade between Bordeaux and London has always been incredibly robust. It's been, one of the reasons that Bordeaux has become sort of the epicenter of the wine market world as it is now. And wine auctions were held in the UK throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s, spearheaded by a man named Michael Broadbent, who is the head of the wine department at Christie's. Well, Michael's vision, of course, extended beyond just the UK. And in 1981, Christie's held the first commercial wine auctions in the USA in Chicago. And the reason they held it in Chicago in 1981, and a young man named Michael Davis, who has since gone on to become incredibly influential figure in the wine world. He's now the executive chairman of Hart Davis Hart, was a young employee at the time, was because New York had basically said, you know what, you're not holding wine auctions here. And the reason they said that was because the retail lobby was so strong, they did not want anyone else kind of interfering with their retail business. But Christie's were actually the company that established the kind of, shall we call it, beachhead of commercial wine auctions in the United States, which have gone on to, of course, become worldwide. And I hope you like my slide here. And if you notice the auctioneer, he is standing in front of maybe the most motley collection of bottles you could possibly imagine, things that would not ever be accepted for auction right now. So now let's go to the next slide, please. And we talk about changes in the global wine market. Well, live auctions were kind of de rigueur pretty much up until the pandemic. And then the model changed. We couldn't get together in person anymore. The online auctions that had kind of been reserved for kind of lower tier and high volume sales actually became what wine auctions were all about. And more than that, it was a shift to Hong Kong. And the reason is that the Asian influence on the market for fine wine at auction had been growing steadily for about 10 years. And Asian buyers, strong Asian buyers with money kind of freed up from major capitalists in Hong Kong and mainland China, were entering the market. They were strong. They were interested in wine. They were really, really engaged. And over 2020, the market kind of pivoted. It pivoted towards a much more global base. It wasn't just London. It wasn't just New York. It became London, New York, Hong Kong. And they were blockbusters in 2020. Huge blockbuster auctions that people can't travel. So they were interested in buying wine. And they were interested in buying good wine with great provenance. And that's what the major international auction houses provided. And just a little bit of notes here. In the first half of 2020, the top 4 auction houses in the world, Ackers, Sotheby's, Zacky's, and HDH, Hart Davis Hart in Chicago, by the way, all between the 4 of them actually, sold over $300 million US in fine wine. They included such kind of great sellers as the Union Square Hospitality Danny Myers Group in New York, the incredible seller from Del Posto in New York that Hart Davis Hart sold, which was one of the most definitive Italian offerings ever created. And this online model that auction houses pivoted to, based out of Hong Kong, offered what I will call a less intimidating and more accessible model for a far greater variety of clients. And that's the world that we are now living in today. So let's go to the next slide, please. And let's talk about new models in Canada. So as of now, there are wine auctions conducted in Ontario. There are wine auctions conducted in Quebec. But really, there's no other auctions kind of conducted for the rest of the country. And that's, because of provincial regulatory rules. And, because I think to a large extent, for the same reason that I started we started the wine auctions back in 2002, nobody else had really tried it. And right now, provincial liquor rules are undergoing real changes. There's a huge shift. Provinces are looking for ways to raise money. There are new players coming into the market, particularly in Ontario. We're looking at, who could have imagined that a year and a half ago, restaurants would be able to operate as bottle shops. Next gen sommeliers are kind of curating these bottle lists and creating these stores, and they're doing some great things. And so they're entering the market. Throughout the pandemic, consumers have been dying to buy and sell wine. And we're sort of at a kind of what I would call maybe a tipping point. Canadians are, wanting to buy abroad. In many instances, they can't. And more importantly, there's a huge changing demographic right now. In previous times, wine auctions were kind of dominated by, a very kind of small and elite coterie of people buying. And now it's much more diverse. In particularly, women are entering the fine wine market in ways that they have in fine wine auction market in ways that they have never done before. It's long overdue and great to see. There is a greater sort of demographic in terms of both age and race entering the market, which is also incredible to see. And it is made for a very, very vibrant scene. Let's go to the next slide, please. So why buy at auction? There's so many reasons to buy at auction. And number one, I think, is the opportunity to acquire rare vintages and producers that are not available at retail at all, either in your local retailer anywhere or, abroad for that instance. And it allows collectors to fill in gaps in their collection. Collectors are an obsessive bunch, and they're always about putting together the collection that reflects their taste. And in many cases, they want to have every vintage of pretty much everything in their cellar, particularly if you're a Bordeaux or a Burgundy collector. For me, though, I would say that the best reason to buy wine at auction is that you can buy mature wines that are ready to drink now, that don't require further cellaring, that have good provenance, that have a certain pedigree to them, and you're not going to have to hold on to them. We're living in sort of a world where I would say that we want kind of immediate gratification, and many of us don't have a big wine cellar in our basement or in our condo in order to sell things. And if we get the opportunity to be able to acquire great wine, and let's drink it. Let's drink it let's drink it for Passover. Let's drink it for Easter. Let's drink it for Christmas. The other issue that we should probably talk about is that why buy wine at auction? Well, it's not just for the uber rich. If you look at the average wine auction, not just in Calgary or Toronto or in New York and Hong Kong, you'll find a plethora of great wines that are readily available and on, I would call, budget terms available. And you'll find these in some of the selections that I'm going to kind of point out to you later in our talk tonight. But it's not just the cream of the cream. There's all kinds of other things that are really, really accessible. And that's, I think, what makes wine auctions really ultimately very, very exciting. The other thing I should probably point out is that there are a lot of speculators out there right now. And wine is considered by many to be a very tangible asset, liquid, pun intended, and with the potential to buy and resell later on for profit. There's an old sort of adage about, people who used to buy cases of DRC to put away. They would drink one and then sell the rest in order to pay for their children's education. And I think given prices for DRC right now, that's, not a big surprise. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in preparing for an auction, there are some things you should probably do, and you should do. And there's some questions that should be asked. So how are things lotted? Well, lots are groups of wines that are put together by the auction house, and they are groups of wines that make sense, that seem to kind of go together. For instance, if you had a full case of Chateau Margaux 1982 in original wood, that would represent a lot. If you had 6 bottles of Chateau Coste d'Estournel 1989, that would represent a great lot. If you had, for instance, a single bottle of DRC 1994 Latache, well, that would make a great lot as well. And the auction house determines what way lots are put together. And this ties into the next point, which is understanding estimates and reserves, because estimates and reserves are about the market value. And we come to our estimates and reserves, all auction houses do, by observing the market, similar to any kind of market for paintings, for houses, for vintage collectible cars and things like that. So you look at what comparable things are being paid for, and then you base your estimate, your best guess of what that market value is by applying those same sort of criteria. So if you've seen that in auctions worldwide, judging by the databases that you're looking at, that a case of Margaux 82 is selling for $3,000 to $5,000, and the price realized for it is $4,000. Well, then that's a pretty good idea that you will be looking at a $3,000 to $5,000 estimate for your case of Chateau Margaux 1982. Reserves at auction are actually what are called the minimum bids. The minimum bids are the lowest price for which that lot will sell for. And in most cases online these days, most auction houses worldwide have kind of come around to the thinking that the minimum or reserve bid is the starting bid. It used to be back in the day with live auctions that the minimum bid might not be the starting bid, and the auctioneer would kind of take bids off the chandelier here, the chandelier there. Whoops, losing my notes. 1 second, please. But nowadays, the best practices by all auction houses are that the minimum bid or the reserve bid is the starting bid. So what kind of things should I be looking for as a consumer? Well, condition. If you're buying wine and you're going to be drinking it, you want to know that the wine you're drinking is in great condition. And so you look at your catalog, and most catalogs, and the Iron Gate catalog is no exception at all. In fact, it's very, very clear, detailed photographs. And you zoom in on the photographs. If you see signs of seepage in a picture in an auction catalog, don't buy that wine. It's unlikely that most reputable auction houses, all of the auction houses that I've discussed so far, would never include a wine that has seepage. So you can look at labels. You can look at the condition of the capsule as well. Now, in terms of condition, there are some things that we should really kind of drill down on a little bit. Typically, wines under 20 years of age should have no ullage issues. And ullage is the difference between where the cork stops and the wine begins. Wines over a certain vintage, it's acceptable to have a moderate amount of ullage. Over 25 years, maybe even more a moderate amount of ullage. But the auction house should tell you specifically what that ullage is. And generally, there will be a chart that kind of describes ullage bottom neck or ullage high shoulder. And you should look to these things. Now, if you are uncertain, always contact the auction house or the auction house specialist. And they will be able to tell you, because they will have firsthand knowledge of what the condition of each wine is. And if you're uncertain, always contact the auction specialist, because once you bid and once you bought the wine, that bid is in 100% of cases irrevocable. So you have to do your research. And that comes down to the old saying, caveat emptor, or buyer beware. The next stage in the process is registering to bid. And what's involved here in registering to bid? Well, generally, in registering to bid, you are, just signing in, you're putting your email address, you're in some instances giving a credit card, you're letting the auction house know that you are a verifiable and verified bidder. It's not really that simple. We all register for everything these days, and it's not a difficult process. Strategies: when to jump in and staggered bidding. Here's the way it works in most auctions these days. Once the auction starts, there are some people who are so enthusiastic that they want to go in and place bids on every lot that they're interested in. That's a great strategy. And you can place proxy bids. You can say, I'm going to bid X, Y, and Z for X, Y, and Z lots, and then go away and come back in a week, and hopefully you're successful. Most of us, though, are a little more proactive than that and want to be involved throughout the process. And the software these days sends you alerts. It tells you when you've been outbid. It tells you when you're the winning bidder. And it requires kind of a level of engagement that you would get, as if you were participating in a live auction. The other thing that auction houses have introduced, and it's part of the Iron Gate feature as well, is that there's staggered lot closings. And that means that not every lot closes at 6 p.m. on such and such a date. They stagger the closings so that, because wine auctions tend to be large, 400, 500, 600 lot offerings, you'll stagger the closings so that the first 50 lots close at one time, 20 minutes later, the next 50 lots close, 20 minutes later, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the other thing you should know when buying at auction is that auction houses make their money from two ways. The first is the seller's commission. Every seller pays a commission for selling a lot of wine through an auction house. And then the auction house also charges what's called a buyer's premium. And the buyer's premium is typically anywhere between 15 and 25%. In the case of the Iron Gate auction, I believe it's 17.5%. And that is added on to the hammer price, or the final price of the lot that you're buying, as well as the provincial sales tax. The other thing to consider is the cost of shipping, and consult the terms and conditions for the auction house that you're dealing with to find out precisely what the terms are for the buyer's premium and, of course, the shipping. Now, many Canadians like to buy internationally. That is much more difficult than you would think, depending on the province that you live in. And I'm not sure, obviously, where everybody who's attending tonight lives, but consult your provincial restrictions there. May we have the next slide, please? Time for a drink. Cheers. So over the years, there have been some resources that I've come to rely on time and time again. And when you're doing your research, when you want to know what a wine is selling for, it's not always the auction house's websites that you can go to find out. Winesearcher.com. And I use wine-searcher.com to find out what the average retail price for a wine is all over the world, or all over Canada, all over the United States. You can filter it by any means necessary. You can get the pro version, which is very reasonable. I believe it's about $100 a year, which gives you access to millions and millions of pieces of data about what wines are selling for internationally. Wine Spectator publishes their wine rating search, their auction index. For auctions, though, I have found that Wine Market Journal, winemarketjournal.com, which is a subscription database which tracks not only where auctions are headed, but for all the sort of broader market indices, what's selling for what right now. And we're living in an era where so much information is available to us. And certainly data-driven information is so important to us as consumers, especially if we're going to be engaged in the fine wine market. And they have broad market indices. The Wine Market Journal 150 tracks the 150 most sort of popular wines that are selling most frequently at auction, and gives us sort of a Dow Jones sense of what the market looks like. And it is an invaluable resource. Now, if you're looking through wine auction catalogs and you're looking, well, what do I buy? How do I find great value? I have found time and time again over the years that looking for mixed lots, wines that are not just one thing, but maybe 2 or 3 different wines combined from 2 or 3 different vintages, often represent the greatest value. Seek out off vintages of great wines. For instance, I remember, 1994 and 1997 were not particularly great vintages for Bordeaux. But if you are a lover and a follower of, great chateau, then a 1994 Montrose is still a Montrose. A 1997 is still a Montrose. A 1996 DRC is still a DRC. Benefit auctions, also great places to buy, but they're becoming places where institutions like the Canadian Opera Company and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, represent kind of the cream of the cream in the Vancouver International Fine Wine Festival. Sort of same situation. Ask questions, make sure that the provenance of the wines that are offered in these charitable auctions is good. So register for the upcoming auction at irongateauctions.com. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I just like to kind of point out some wines that in this auction are actually really interesting to me. And if you have a couple of screens going, you might want to have a look at these. In Bordeaux, I like Lot 78, the Chateau Pape Clement 2003. High scoring wine. Great drinking vintage. You might remember that if you follow the auction closely, that 2003 was a super, super hot vintage, low in acidity. It means it's drinking relatively earlier. This is a lot in original condition and, original wooden case. And the estimate seems to be awfully reasonable. 117 and 118. The Clerc-Millon 1986. 86 is sort of overshadowed by the 100-point Bordeaux of Chateau Mouton Rothschild. And Clerc-Millon is a Rothschild property. It's a fifth growth wine that is always kind of punches above its weight. Just a wonderful, wonderful wine. If you're interested in kind of bargain Burgundy, I sort of highlighted some, Lot 148, the 1995 Dominique Laurent Vaux Romanée. Incredible producer. And this lot features basically all the single vineyards. So it's an opportunity to explore all these different terroirs. If you're a trophy hunter, go no further than Lot 149, that beautiful assortment case of DRC, Domaine de la Romanée-Conti 2004. I like value in wine auctions. And so I looked at Lot 227, the mixed vintages of Domaine de Marcoux, Chateau Notre Pape. Can never get enough of that wine. And this highlights wines from 90, 92, 94, 95, and 98. Italian lovers look at 286. There's a mini vertical of a Massetto. And if you're a Spanish wine lover, and if you're a bargain wine lover, lots 305 to 316, the mixed vintages of Tinto Pesquera by Alejandro Fernandez from the Ribera del Duero. Always one of my favorite wines, ready to drink wines, and beautifully made by the pioneer of the Ribera del Duero, Alejandro Fernandez. And if I was going to pick one lot of California wine, it would be lot number 370. It's a lot of 1997 Dominus. Parker gave it a 94. But more than that, Napa wines tend to get drunk really young. And when you do have the opportunity to drink a really great mature Napa wine, your patience will be rewarded. So thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation today. I'm sure there's lots of questions that still to be asked. I'm going to, and we will take questions, I believe, at the end. If I'm unable to answer questions, then someone from Iron Gate Auctions will contact you, as I'm a guest speaker here tonight. And thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you about wine auctions, of which I'm so passionate about. So Warren, I'm going to pass it back over to you. And Warren's going to run you through the what the platform looks like.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. I'll ask you just to mute yours if you could, and I'll take over. Hopefully everybody can hear me fine. I'll add a couple little things before I get into the platform. A lot of people have asked us why we had gotten into this, and particularly why Alberta. We've sold in the United States for many years, and about a year and a half ago, a tariff was imposed on us. So we began looking in Canada, which makes me happy anyway, because we were writing some pretty big checks to the United States government. And so happy to come into Canada. And we began to look across the country at where was the best place for us and our customers. So we've been in business for 17 years. As many of you know, and a lot of people on the line here today have been with us since almost day one, and we always appreciate your support. And we looked across the country, and Alberta was a tremendous place for us to do business as an entrepreneur. I want a business environment that is good and easy for us to work with. I've got a terrific regulatory board here that's helped us a lot of the way. And the other thing that has occurred is, or not occurred, the other reason that's very, very big is that our cost of doing business here, tremendous business environment, is we found better than Ontario, and allowed us to offer a 17.5% buyer premium, which is the lowest in Canada. The other thing, of course, as most people know, we've got a 5% sales tax here in Alberta. I happen to be in Calgary at the moment. So out of the gate, we've got a 10.5% advantage. And that's really, really big at the price points that we are selling at. So without further ado, I'm going to show you a couple of highlights from the auction, from the auction site. Oops. Okay, one moment. Okay, now I've actually got two that are running right now. We've got a catalog that you can see here. This is the one that you're looking at. That anybody can go on to right now at irongateauctions.com. And what I've also done is I've started one that's in kind of a staging environment, such that I can actually show what it looks like to bid. So one of the things we did an auction for the TSO recently, and we listened to a lot of people's feedback, and imparted a lot of those in here. And so what we've done is a couple of things. From a filtering perspective, you can see down the side here that we've expanded this, and you can see that you know, at the beginning, you're looking at almost 400 lots, but if really you're just interested in Burgundy, then you can click on that, and all you're going to be seeing is Burgundy. I think I've got a bit of a slower internet connection today, but that's okay. And so now all you're seeing is strictly Burgundy. And then we might add United States as well. And now you'll see all just US and Burgundy ones in here, which have brought those down to 107 different lots. If we go and drill down into a lot specifically, 148 being one of the ones that Steve was talking about. To Stephen's point about checking for quality, what we have done, instead of writing it up everywhere, we've gone to great lengths to make sure that that we've taken photographs of everything in high definition so that everybody can zoom in and see all the exact conditions of wine. They can look at label conditions. They can, you can see all the fill levels that Steve was talking about to make sure those are nice and high, or as he was mentioning, appropriate for the age of that wine. You can add these wines to a watch list. Let's go back to the auction catalog. There's two different searches that are actually possible. One's a search on the top right-hand corner up here, which searches the entire platform. And then there's one that's off on the left. I have a very slow internet connection today, I'm sorry. And then there's another search over here, which is just showing a search from within the ones you've filtered. So for example, if I just wanted to look at France, and I could do a search here from within France and just find ones that are from, Margaux, for example, and type that in there, okay? So let me move this out of the way. Okay, so my screen has luck. Oh, here it is. Okay, it's coming up. It's a little slow today. So here's what we're going to see. As you search through the auction, there's a number of different features that we have added that are going to make it much easier for you. So as I bid on things and I'm winning, you'll see here that it shows that I'm winning that lot. I can go up here into my bids, and I'll be able to see all of the different wines that I have bid on and how they are doing, what the current bid is. And I can see wines that I have been outbid on, that I have bid on before, and somebody has outbid me. When I am outbid, I will get an SMS text message on my phone, providing I agree to that at the beginning. I'll also get an email that shows that came through. I can also click on my watch list, and maybe for wines that I haven't necessarily decided to bid on, but I do want to see and follow what they're doing, even ones that maybe I have bid on, I'll be able to see here and kind of keep an eye on them and see how they're doing. And so this one here, now, for example, I'll look at this Louis Latour Chateau Corton Grossi and decide that this is one that I want to bid on. Now, this has a starting bid or a reserve of $600 for these 3 bottles of the 85. And so what I can do in this is I can, yes, just click bid here. But the other thing I can do is say, I'm willing to go up to, I don't know, $1,000 on this lot. So I'm going to go to $1,000 and I'm going to hit bid. But what it's going to do is it's going to keep my bid at $600 because that's what the starting bid was. You'll see here, you successfully placed a bid and your max bid is $1,000. Now, if somebody comes in behind me and they bid the 650, it's going to go up to 650, but they won't win because my max bid is, and nobody can see this, is $1,000. So that way I don't have to keep coming back time and time again. So that's very, very handy. The other thing that I'm going to show you, one of the little tricks that's on the site is that you can do a sort by the most active auction item. And if you do a sort towards the end of the auction by most active, okay, and then you took it and went to the very last page of this, you would see lots that may not have a bid on them yet, instead of having to go through every single one. So if you're looking for bargains or ones that might be at the reserve or ones that might still be very low because they haven't had a lot of interest on them, sort the auction by most active, go to the very last page, and then work your way backward from there. A credit card is required in order to bid on the wine, but it's not required to go and search. But we're expecting a very busy auction, and this is not going to be our final one for sure. We have an awful lot of wine that's coming in. We have the significant advantage of having been in the business for a long time, and we see a lot of people who are looking to thin out their collection a little bit. A lot of times we find wine strictly from a changing palate. People have moved from Bordeaux into Burgundy and thus are thinning out a lot of their Bordeaux collection. We pay a lot of attention to provenance. A lot of the people most of the people in this current auction are folks that I have known for quite a number of years. and the conditions that these wines have come out of are incredibly important to us. We understand that provenance is probably the most important thing, so we don't take that lightly. The other thing I will mention, that I also mention to people who are selling their wine, is that the majority of the bidding is going to happen in the last couple of hours. Okay, so I would set some time aside, pour yourself a nice glass of wine, and on the Tuesday night following, on March the 30th, is when the auction is going to be finishing across the country in staggered lots. The countdown clock that you see on your screen is based on your local time zone. So that's not the time Eastern or Mountain or Pacific. That's the amount of time that you have left. And so recognize that most of the bidding takes place at the very end. And so as Stephen was mentioning, we've got an incredible number of lots that are incredible quality of lots that are coming through in this auction, including some remarkable Burgundy, some DRC, which you almost never see auctioned in Canada. We've got a large auction coming up shortly after this, with everything from a vertical of Screaming Eagle to some nicely aged La Tâche as well. So anyway, as I mentioned at the top of the seminar, a lot of people who are joining us on the call tonight and who will be participating in our auction are friends and customers that we've had throughout our 17 years in the business. And I want to personally thank you for all your support over the years. This is another stage in our evolution, and I'm honored to be able to serve you and help you out with your wine collection needs. So now, Liz, I'm going to ask you to help me out if there are any questions that have popped up, or if anybody has any questions. I am probably the least technically proficient guy when it comes to Zoom and Zoom calls. So I'm going to ask.
Don't you worry, Warren. You're doing just great. We do have a question. We have a question about shipping of wines to successful bidders. So what happens if you live outside of Alberta, for example, and you bid successfully? Yeah,
sure. So we have bidders that are coming in from British Columbia, from Hong Kong, from the United States. And so the first thing that we do in order to apply the lowest tax rate in Canada is we sell you that wine in Alberta, okay? So we transfer title of that wine, I'll use my lawyer's talk, to you in Alberta. And then you will get a call from a shipping company that we have chosen to make arrangements for you to send it to whatever country or province you happen to be in. I'm not an expert on all the different subtle regulations between provinces and countries, but listen, we've done wine auctions across Canada for many years. Every auction house in Toronto and in Quebec ships all over the country. And so it's up to the people who purchase their wine to understand if their local liquor board wants them to come down and pay them or whatever is required. But I do know that wines move across this country from wine auctions every month.
Thank you, Warren. We also have a question around the data of people who participate. So essentially, what happens to the data? For example, credit card. I'm assuming credit card information.
So first off, you're not going to get a lot more phone calls for duct cleaning. I'll guarantee you that. So when somebody subscribes to Iron Gate Auctions, we advise them of other auctions that we have, and that's about it. Okay. So we have auctions when our platform is not being used for our commercial auction. We allow specific charities to use it as well to help raise money for their charity, which, as Stephen was mentioning, has become quite popular, particularly during COVID, when these charities can't have their gala. So our buyers want to know not only when we're doing a commercial auction, but also when the Canadian Opera Company is doing one, the Vancouver International Wine Festival, Cystic Fibrosis. There are a number of charity auctions that a lot of people participate in. So a long way to answer a very short and simple question is, we don't do anything with your data outside of advising you of other auctions that we will be hosting. And if you want off that list, we'll take you off immediately, but that's it.
Thank you. Another question came in around, and I don't know how much insight you might have on this, Warren, maybe in general terms, around what would sort of do you know what the average sort of shipping cost, or give some kind of frame of reference for what it would cost to ship a lot of wine from Alberta to, let's say, Quebec, perhaps, or Ontario?
Well, what I do know is that we have offered to pay for multi-day refrigerated shipping into the major cities of Canada for our customers. So if you are in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, we'll pay for MDR. And what MDR means is that it's a consolidated shipment of wine that the shipping company will arrange. And Iron Gate has offered to pay for it because we don't want shipping to be a big part of your decision to participate in the auction. And so, so if you don't need it overnight, there's a lot of courier companies in Canada that, and our shipping company that we've contracted with will arrange that for you. If you want to have it by the next day, that's obviously different than multi-day refrigerated, but we'll take care of the shipping costs for those major centers. And the best thing to do is wait within a day of the auction. You'll have a call from the shipping company who will help you make those arrangements and let you know the cost. But it's surprisingly inexpensive from the research that they had done and contacted us about. Quite frankly, it was inexpensive enough that we offered to do it. We offered to pay for it for at least all of 2021, so that it didn't pose an objection to somebody in participating in the auction.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess on the same line, I don't know if you have insight into this, but we have a question specifically about St. John's, Newfoundland. Would you happen to have any insight about shipping to that particular location, or is that again more a question of?
Well, you know what? It's a better question for the shipping company. Here's what I know. I have a group of some of my favorite collectors are in St. John's. Our sommelier is from St. John's. The Newfoundlanders are some of my favorite people on the planet. I do know that shipping to the Rock can be quite expensive, but I think it's probably best to talk to the shipping company, because what we can't do to St. John's is multi-day refrigerated, because it's not a large enough point to make it a hub. But I can't answer the question of what overnight shipping would be for a 12-pack to St. John's. But if you want to shoot me a note, though, I'll put you in touch with somebody before the auction who will let you know what it would cost, for example, to overnight a 12-pack to Newfoundland. That way you'll know in advance. Happy to do that.
Great. Okay, a question about staggering the closing of the lots at the last day of the auction. Can you just give us a bit more detail around that? Which lots are you closing, like the first 50 lots first, and then what's the interval, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So when we completed our last auction, we closed everything at the same time, and there were people who might have had 40 outstanding bids. And so when we realized a lot happens in the last couple of minutes, that was very difficult for them to be able to go in and put in some last minute bids. So what we chose to do is staggered closings. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be closing 50 lots every 15 minutes, okay? So there's almost 400 lots. So that allows it to close throughout over the course of 2 hours. So hopefully that will help people who have their lots a little bit spread out and make it easier for them to put in last minute bids. We didn't want to elongate it too much and have it close out over a period any longer than 2 hours. So we thought that after much discussion, that was going to be the best staggering that we could do. The one thing that I will mention, when we built this platform, Our head of technology, Greg Tilson, did an amazing job with our developers at building this, and we decided that we would buy it and build it so that we could continuously improve it a little bit more each time. We're not going to have everything out of the gate, but we're going to listen. We've made a lot of improvements since the TSO auction, and we'll keep adding more and more stuff to it. It's in our control. It cost us a lot more money to build it out of the gate than to buy an auction platform off the shelf, but that's what we chose to do, and we're going to keep making it better and better. And I would encourage you to send us anything that you think would be nice as an add-on to have. Mind you, for all the different add-ons that I wanted, I did have to shut it down because at some point there's a little word called budget, And so we'll keep adding as budget allows.
Are there any other questions? We've cleared all of the questions that are in. Oh, okay, here they come. Fantastic. We have a question about if a bidder creates sort of that maximum or identifies their ceiling, how, like, once somebody sort of outbids their initial bid, like how quickly does the system submit the next bid, right? So if I've bid and then somebody else outbids me, how quickly does that process happen?
I think I understand the question. So for example, a lot is starting at 500 and you bid it up to $1,000. Somebody comes in and right now it's sitting at 500 and that's your bid. Somebody comes in and bids 550. You're still in. You don't even notice that necessarily unless you go in and check your bids all the time to see what it's kind of rising up to. You'll be notified literally seconds after they have exceeded your high bid. But when that person bids, you're starting it at 500, they bid at 550, they go, sorry, you've been outbid. And then they go, oh, okay, I'll go to 600. They go to 600, sorry, you've been outbid, because the system has said, I'm going to keep bidding on your behalf, proxy bidding, all the way up until your maximum of $1,000. At which point, if that person goes over top of it, you're going to get an email and a text message notice instantly. I hope that answers.
I mean, so can I just maybe give an analogy and you tell me if so it's kind of like when you go to book an appointment and it just tells you what's not available after you try to book it, right? Like it will only let you finally book it when it's available. So that,
I guess that could be an analogy.
It won't let you bid again until.
It's the software bidding on your behalf. So pretend that you're sitting in an auction house and you know you want to go to $1,000, and somebody keeps bidding up another $50 and another $50, and you're just sitting there going, well, I know I'm going to go to 1,000, so 650, 750, 8, and it just keeps going. And then finally at 1,000, if that other bidder goes, you tap out, right? So it's kind of like the software doing that work for you, one increment at a time, so that you don't have to come back. It was something that we didn't have for the TSO auction. And it was really important because people would keep getting outbid and they'd have to keep going back and back and back and doing it all over again. So it's a very valuable feature to make your life a lot easier bidding.
Great, thank you. We have a question about if somebody wanted to consign their wine, what that process is like.
The best thing to do is to get a hold of me, Warren, at irongate.wine. If you call into our general number, Megan can help you, Irina can help you. I've got the best staff in the world. And we'll start the process. I was writing up an FAQ to go onto the site today, and that was one of the questions that I sought to answer. And the wine that we'll look at, first and foremost, is wine that has been taken care of properly. That is auctionable wine. So your, the Matus Rosé that your father gave you 25 years ago probably isn't going to make it into an auction, but thanks. And so we look for quality of product. We look for quality of storage and auctionable product. Then we look at condition, see how it's held. As Stephen was mentioning, ullage is probably one of the most important things I look at. COVID willing, we'll come and take a look at the collection if it's substantial enough. Otherwise, we do like to see photographs of the cellar and your temperature storage conditions and things like that. But they're welcome to get a hold of us. I will say, though, that maybe it's the press coverage that we've gotten in the last little while, but we have a lot of wine that's coming in, which I couldn't be happier about. But be careful that your expectation isn't set, that we'll be able to auction it off next month for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. They're coming in fast and furious. We did have, basically a follow-up of from that earlier question around the data of individuals who place bids. Specifically, can you provide information on what happens to credit card information after the auction?
I think I would have to tell you what, instead of me sending that on the fly, I believe what happens to be CPI compliant is that data. I don't know the answer to that. I know that CPI compliance was a big thing. I saw Greg just unmuted. Maybe Greg could answer that, who's head of our technology.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so we use a credit card processor that's PCI compliant. We don't hold any of your credit card data. Everything is held with our credit card processor. And, the only time you ever use your credit card again with us is when you want to purchase with us, and that's it. So we don't know anything about your credit card data.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, that's right too. Actually, we don't see those numbers anyhow. Yeah, appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Greg. Okay, so I have a question about essentially the closing of the lots. So I guess the question is, as to the closing of the lot, how long before, how much time has to elapse before the decision is made?
The first set of lots shut down from 1 to 50 at, let's say 8 p.m. Eastern time, okay? And then the other lots from lot 51 onward shut down immediately at 8:15. Then the next set immediately at 8:30. So that's how the lot closings are set up.
Okay, thank you. And then we did have a question, and I think you addressed it, but maybe just to be totally certain, again, this goes back to provenance. You talked about being very careful and cautious around, understanding the conditions that wines have been stored in. But do you have specific requirements? What is the criteria?
A lot of times, people will have product that they have bought 20 or 30 years ago that may still have another 30 years on it. I dig in as much as I possibly can. Understand this. The worst thing that I can have happen is for somebody to buy a wine and not be happy with it, to open it and not have the moment that they were expecting, okay? We take no joy in somebody not having a wine that's great. We had a wine that it's almost comical. It came in for an auction previous to this at the TSO that was from 1869, and somebody was grilling me on the provenance, and I went, dude, it's 150 years old. But one of the things that we check is that the people who have had it in their possession, when have they gotten their wine? And look, it's a collection. There could be 1,000 bottles of a number of different things, but serious collectors buy their wine from places with great provenance, okay? And they take care of the wine themselves. I don't want to say it's an urban myth, but the adage about wine underneath grandma's steps, we're not interested in that stuff. We turn away a lot of product we turn away just because it simply hasn't been stored well enough. And so, we go to as many lengths as we can, because that's the worst thing that I can have happen, that somebody opens up a wine that they're not happy with, because then they're not my customer for life, right?
Thank you. One more question in the field at the moment, and this is about potential consignment. If you have a consignor who's considering several auction houses, do you, in terms of negotiations, do you discount selling commission as part of a potential,
absolutely.
arrangement?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's what I can tell you. First off, a lot of the commission structure depends on the quality and the quantity of the wine. It's like anything, right? If people bring us in a couple of bottles, then it's still a lot of work. And so we've got different commissions. If somebody brings us in an awful lot of wine, that's some of the best wine we can have, then that's going to be different as well. So the answer to negotiation is, yeah, absolutely. We'll do as good for you as we can. To that end, that's one of the reasons I'm in Alberta, right? Because Alberta has a significantly lower cost of doing business. So it's not just, as I mentioned before, not just to the benefit of our buyers from a tax perspective and from a buyer premium perspective, but our cost of doing business is significantly better in this province, which allows us the ability to negotiate.
Thank you very much. We've cleared all the questions that are currently in the Q&A forum.
And Liz, we did it right at 7:02. So we kept it within our exact hour. I'm very happy that we can actually go to their wine.
Yes. So unless there's any last minute questions.
Those questions were terrific. As Steve was mentioning, I want to thank Stephen Ranger again for his part. If anybody has any other questions or something that I wasn't clear enough on, It's Warren at irongate.wine. We're starting the auction on Tuesday, so we've still got a lot of work that we have to do here, but I will get back to everybody as quickly as I can. And I want to again really thank you for not only participating in this call, but also for participating in our auction and helping us get the word out for it. And we're really looking forward to it. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I hope it helps satisfy the needs of our client even more than we have.
And allow me just to interrupt you. Sorry, Warren, one more time. I've just shared a link in the chat bar to a feedback survey. If you would kindly take just 1 to 2 minutes very quickly and share your feedback with us on tonight's webinar, we'd be ever so grateful. Will help us improve for the future. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Happy bidding. Good luck.